Hey there, church family. Welcome back to another episode of Inspiring Stories from Church History. Now, today's video actually marks the final episode in this series. So thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you've enjoyed watching these videos as much as I've enjoyed making them. But to finish things off right, we've got someone extra special to talk about today, a contemporary theologian whom I very much admire, René Padilla. As I mentioned in some of our previous videos, over the course of the 20th and 21st centuries, the majority world and global south, including Latin America, have become home to most of the world's Christians. And these countries that the West formerly identified as mission fields have become the primary missionary sending countries of the world. This explosion of the gospel throughout these regions has also extended to the realm of theological scholarship and influence. And over the course of the past 60 years or so, a key voice emerging from Latin American evangelicalism and leading the global church has been that of the late René Padilla. So let's begin. Carlos René Padilla Gijón was born in Quito, Ecuador, on October 12th, 1932. His parents had both become Christians 10 years earlier at the opening of the first evangelical church in Quito. René was number 4 out of 7 children, and 2 years after he was born, due to economic hardship caused by the Great Depression, the Padilla family moved to Colombia, where René lived until he was 12 years old, when his family moved back to Ecuador because of the constant religious persecution they were experiencing in Colombia as Protestants. At age 15, René Padilla fully embraced his parents' faith as his own, and he converted to Christ. Soon after, he started energetically preaching on the streets of his city, and he would often visit people in prison to share the gospel with them and to minister to their needs. He even worked with the famous missionaries Jim Elliot and Nate Saint before they were later killed in the rainforests of Ecuador. After high school, Padilla attended Wheaton College, where he received his bachelor's degree in philosophy in 1957 and his master's degree in theology in 1960, concentrating in biblical studies. During his studies, he participated in leadership for the student ministries known as InterVarsity and as International Fellowship of Evangelical Students. René Padilla married Catherine Ruth Fraser, whom he called Cati, in 1961. They had met at Wheaton, and when he proposed, he told her that she would be marrying Latin America as well as him if she said yes, since they would be living there. And she agreed. And shortly after marrying, they moved to Colombia, and then 2 years later to Quito, Ecuador. René and Cati had 5 children, 4 girls and a boy, throughout these and the years which followed. And in 1963, René began his PhD studies in New Testament at the University of Manchester in the UK, which he finished in 1965. The family then moved to Peru for 2 years, while René served a term running the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students. And in 1967, the family made their final move, settling in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Here, René learned and worked in publication. He also soon helped to found the Fraternidad Teológica Latinoamericana, the FTL, or Latin American Theological Fellowship in English, an influential association of Latin American evangelical theologians. Now, a key moment in Padilla's work, and which introduced him to the global stage, was in 1974, when he was invited to speak at the International Congress on World Evangelization in Lausanne, Switzerland. Later known as the First Lausanne Congress, this was a massive meeting of over 2,300 evangelical leaders from 150 different countries, funded and organized by Billy Graham, which gathered to discuss and draw up a shared evangelical statement on mission. Padilla was invited, along with another influential Latino theologian, Samuel Escobar, to speak at the Congress, representing the growing evangelical theological voice of Latin America. Padilla considered this a golden opportunity to express some of the key theological concerns of Latin American evangelicals, including some of their frustrations with the evangelical church throughout North America and Europe. Padilla delivered a bombshell of a speech at the Lausanne Congress, which greatly impacted the final statement produced. One of his critiques was that the church of the past, both in the West and in the East, has tended to export its own culture when engaging in missions, imposing this culture, as well as the gospel, on those receiving the message. With missionaries sent from North America and Western Europe, for example, since the early modern period, the message has largely been, to become Christian, you must also become Western. Padilla dubbed this practice culture Christianity, and he argued that it is just as much a distortion of the gospel as is the secular Christianity of many mainline churches, which claim that the gospel is only about social progress and restoring human relationships, rather than equally about restoring the divine human relationship. However, Padilla identified the practice of culture Christianity not only in the mission work of colonialism, but also in the missions stemming from the United States, which had often equated Christianity with the American way of life, emphasizing technology, industrialization, and American ways of doing church. Now, another key concept which Padilla introduced in his speech was the phrase which would become his legacy, Misión Integral, or integral mission. This phrase refers to the fact that both evangelism and social action are essential and indivisible tasks of the Christian church. One ought not to be practiced without the other. In his words, trying to separate them and elevate one over the other would be like asking about the relative importance of the right wing and the left wing of a plane. Padilla called this integral mission because it attempts to integrate the vertical and horizontal dimensions of the gospel, divine human reconciliation and interhuman reconciliation, reforming these into a single whole in our missional practice. It's also sometimes referred to as holistic mission because, like the ministry of Jesus, it attempts to bring healing to the whole person. Padilla, along with many others in Latin America, were sick and tired of the one-sided emphases of different missionary groups from North America and Europe. The fundamentalists would only focus on evangelism, with almost no concern for social action in the face of injustice and oppression, and the liberal modernists would only be concerned with social action, neglecting the supremely important spiritual need of people for reconciliation with God through Christ. Integral mission brings these two sides together in a biblical way. 2 years after the Lausanne Congress, Padilla helped to found the Comunidad Kairos, in English referred to as the Kairos Community or Kairos Center for Integral Mission, which provides interdisciplinary theological education, often for church lay people. And this was an outgrowth of his and Kathy's previous ministry, the Centro de Estudios Teológicos Interdisciplinarios, or CETI, in English, the Center for Interdisciplinary Theological Studies. He also joined the pastoral team of a Baptist church in a suburb of Buenos Aires. He continued preaching, teaching, writing, and publishing throughout the next several decades, traveling around the world to help train people in practicing integral mission. His efforts were met with increasing friendliness over the course of these decades, so that by the time he spoke again at the 4th Lausanne Congress, held in Pattaya, Thailand, in 2004, virtually no one needed to be convinced at this point that integral mission is biblical and foundational for the mission of God's people. Kathy Padilla passed away in 2009, and after remarrying a few years later, René Padilla went home to be with the Lord on April 27th, 2021. René Padilla leaves behind quite a legacy of Christian love and service. His theological work, especially in the realm of integral mission, has powerfully reminded the global church of its call to love as Jesus loved. His work also demonstrates the rapidly growing role of Latin American Christians in evangelical leadership, in such a way that, as historian Justo González puts it, if future generations of Christians in places such as the United States are to understand their own faith and its origins, they will have to take Latin America into account. Padilla reminds us that we, the church, as God's people, are called to be a sign and a foretaste of God's kingdom. I pray that all of us together learn to live this out more and more faithfully each and every day. So that's all for now. Stick around for the discussion questions once again here at the end. It has truly been a joy for me to journey with you all through these inspiring stories from church history, and I pray that you have been blessed by them. May you all be encouraged by these stories to keep living out the faith. Thanks so much for watching, and blessings on you all.